In this video, I'll give you the principles you need to make sense of strategic goals and objectives, and a checklist you can use to get them in place in a way that gets you the results you need faster, even when the world around you is in a constant state of change. These work whether you're the CEO or a leader on the team. They work for any strategy in any industry. I've personally used these exact principles helping companies that are on the Fortune 500, the Inc. 5000, and even startups. So I've seen them work across industries in all kinds of high-stakes situations. And now with my current company, Result Maps, we run a software platform that helps CEOs enact these principles. So I get to see them actually play out. These aren't theoretical concepts. These are the things that work. If you're one of our Result Maps customers or part of our Result Maps community, welcome. It's great to have you here. If you're new to our channel and this video, make sure you subscribe using the button below and hit the like button so we get some love from the LinkedIn algorithm. All that said, let's dive in. So the first principle that can really help you make sense of strategic goals and objectives is very simply to keep things simple. There are a lot of different theories written out there. There are a lot of different frameworks. There's a lot of proprietary names for strategic goals and objectives, and even saying strategic goals and objectives, I'm already tripping all my warning bells for jargon alerts. So in order to get around all that, we're going to work to keep things simple. How are we going to keep things simple? Well, we're going to start from the idea of first principles. First principles are ideas that we can build on top of because they are always true. So the first of those first principles I'm going to give you that allows us to keep things simple is the theory of constraints. So this goes by a lot of names. I actually learned it as the iron triangle when I was a junior consultant. I learned it from a mentor. It's the idea that you've got three variables that you can really affect whenever you're working. You've got time, you've got cost, and you have quality as represented by specifically defined qualities. So you can have any two of those things on the iron triangle, but you're always going to give on the third. And that's one of the first principles we want to make sure that we make sense of, because what strategic goals and objectives are going to let you do, in fact, what having a strategy is going to let you do, is make the most of the constraints at hand. The next idea that is a really strong first principle to have is the idea that we don't really read each other's minds, but research shows over and over and over that as humans, we will overestimate how much we understand the other person, how much they understand us. This has been verified again and again and again. So we're going to take that as a first principle. People don't read each other's minds. Next, in order to keep things simple, we're going to keep things to the rule of three. People can remember three things. We're trying to keep people moving in the same direction, as I'll get to here in a minute. That's a big part of why we're doing this. So we're going to keep things in threes in a way that's easy for everyone to understand. Finally, to keep things simple, we're going to stay focused on the results we're trying to get by having strategic goals and objectives. That's going to keep us out of some of the jargon traps that can slow people down, create friction, and create a ton of unnecessary conflicts. We're going to stay focused on why we're using strategic goals and objectives, what they aim to achieve. Strategic goals and objectives really exist to get everyone on the same page moving forward in the same direction. That's what we really want to do, get people moving in the same direction so that even though business can be a little bit abstract sometimes and the way we conduct business can be abstract, we want to create as much clarity as we can because, as we mentioned previously, we don't read minds, and it can be very difficult without some method of showing people the path. It can be very difficult to get your vision into everyone's head in a way that they can understand it. So this is going to give us a way to take your vision and make that vision something more concrete for your team and start to close in some guardrails so people are moving in the right direction when they have to make decisions, when they're figuring out the right sense of urgency, and doing all those things we need to do at work as we prioritize and decide what gets our attention and what doesn't. So getting to this idea of first principles and keeping it simple, I want to propose a definition for strategy. And one of my favorites is the idea of strategy as the story of how you're going to create value for yourself and your customer. I got this from my good friend, Dr. Rebecca Humkeys. And out of all the definitions I've seen, that's the one that resonates the most, because what you're attempting to do is explain to your people that there's a destination you're trying to get to. And to get to that destination, we're going to take this path. And we have to take this path together in order to get there. So keep in mind that you're trying to tell people the story of how you're going to be successful, as represented by selling more, being more profitable. Even when we see our overall vision as serving people, the more we sell, the more people we're able to serve. And it's those sales that drive our ability to serve more people. That's the virtuous cycle we're working on creating. So strategy as story. That's really important for us to keep things simple. In order to keep people dialed in on their strategic goals and objectives, we're going to make them visual. We're going to put them up in a fairly specific format. Now, I've seen a lot of systems where they have like two different places. It's almost like the strategic goals are a silo and they have their own list, and the short-term objectives are another and they have their own list. Make them visual and show how they tie together. You can lay these out in a spreadsheet, and I'll include one of our free spreadsheets in the comments. So make sure you check the comments for that link. But I want to explain to you how it actually works, so don't leave just yet. The idea is we're going to take 3 big targets and we're going to make those our targets for the year. They're the most important priorities we have. 3, as I mentioned, is a really important number. In the great book by Bob Iger of Disney on his tenure at Disney, he talks about the importance of limiting your priorities to 3. So what this lets you do is it lets you say to your team at any time, team, I've shared my vision. Now, to reach that vision this year, we're going to do these 3 things. And you're going to become almost like a machine, just repeating that constantly. What we know about how humans remember information, all of us, is that we need a certain number of repetitions up front, and we need to be reminded consistently. It's going to have to be simple, and you're going to have to remember it. So 3 big goals for the year is what we're looking at. Those are the 3 goals that are going to move you as far as is possible to move in that time period toward your ultimate vision. So once those 3 goals are defined, you can define 3 shorter term targets in each area. And if you're using a system where it's strategic goals and objectives, where those are the labels that are used, then these become your objectives, your shorter term targets. You're going to fit each one of those shorter term objectives into the strategic goal as though that strategic goal is a bucket. And this often brings up the question, well, I have an objective that's going to meet 2 of my goals. And that's going to be the case sometimes. Just pick the one where it's the clearest, best fit. What matters is that you can come back to the story and tell the story well. Because remember, from our first principles, what we're trying to do is get everybody moving in the same direction. And to do that, we have to keep it simple. And to keep it simple, we need to use our strategy to tell the story of how we're going to get there. Most frameworks will set those shorter term targets at 3 months. 3 months is a great time frame to use if you're in an environment that's not changing. In a fast changing environment, it's got to be shorter. 45 days or monthly ought to be your cadence. In a volatile environment, it's important to refine those objectives as new information comes in. Now, you don't want to do it every single week. You don't want to do it in a way where you're constantly shifting the goals. Refine your objectives on a monthly cadence. Look at them and say, is this still the objective we should have? And you can even make that one of your objectives, to refine things on a monthly cadence. At the very least, you need to do it halfway through the quarter and just check in and refine them. You need a cadence of checking in with your team to make sure they understand what these objectives are, and they can push back, tell you where something isn't clear or they think it really doesn't fit with the realities. And one of you can help educate the other, or how we can true up and close this gap in our understanding. So with objectives, how do you make sure that your team stays accountable, and so that whatever those objectives represent, it's the same in your mind as it is in theirs? Well, whether you call it an objective or something else, what's most important is just describing it in a way that makes sense. So that involves 2 steps. Step 1 is give it a title that makes perfect sense. Let me think of an example. Launch a new YouTube series. So now, how are you really going to know that that objective has been achieved? That next step then is to define the criteria for success. Those success criteria are going to define measurable ways we can look at to know that we reached our objective. So for launch a YouTube channel, it might be record the first 3 videos, create the schedule for releasing the videos, create the supporting social media for those videos, things like create the banner, create the YouTube channel. What are the must-haves that once you can check those off, you know you're done? Now, it's important to get this at the right level of detail. I've seen people kind of aggressively start to jam every single detailed step they need to take into the key results. That's not what you want to do. You want to keep these high level. And again, we're going to use a rule of 3s and 5s. No fewer than 3 success criteria. And if you're getting around 5, you want to start asking yourself, could this be better put into its own project? And maybe one of my success criteria becomes complete all the steps in my launch project. The reason you want to keep your key results in place is because they're going to give you the success criteria for your project. Success criteria are broader. They are measurable. For example, I could do the creative for my YouTube channel. I could get all my creative done. Let's say I have a list of 20 pieces of creative or 5 pieces, whatever it is. I could do that entire list and check all those boxes and still not have a successful launch. Just because I've done all those steps doesn't mean I've really launched it. You're trying to get to the essentials that you must have, where you can either check the box or see some number hit in order to know you've reached that objective. If you can't sum it up in 3 to 5 key results, maybe 7 at most, it's a good time to take a step back and ask whether you should refine it and break it down into something a little small. So the next thing to understand about laying out your strategic goals and objectives, if you want them to get you results, is when you get to that success criteria level on your objectives, which your key results are what your success criteria are if you're using objectives and key results. Whatever system you're using, this is like a 3-layered system, right? 1 year, short term, criteria for success. Those are the 3 columns we're looking at. That 3rd column is the one where you want to have one directly responsible individual, and only one. Don't let 2 people own it. If 2 people own it, it's like those videos where 2 outfielders in baseball are going for the same fly ball. You're going to run into each other. Sometimes you're not going to have one person call it and take it. You need one person. That person can go to the other person and get help, but have one person own it. That is how you're going to get the ownership. If you have joint ownership, it's a recipe for problems. But because we all need to own that domain and take it upon ourselves to bring in the right people. That's how you instill leadership in your people as well, or one way you can do it. Having that level of detail now, it suggests that if you've got an objective where all of the key results are assigned to people on one manager's team, one leader's team, well, you know that that leader then owns the objective. And if you're breaking your teams into smaller teams that are meeting for each component of the strategy, that kind of gives you the agenda for their meeting. The key idea here is one directly responsible individual per key result. As CEO or as leader, you own the overall strategic goals. Or if you're in a larger company, that could be a VP or some other leader. Those executives are going to own the overall goals, and you start to distribute ownership via the strategic objectives. So we've told the story of our strategy. We've told the story of how we're working toward our vision by defining where we're going to be at the end of this year and what we're going to do in the short term. What happens frequently is everybody goes, yep, sounds great, boss. We all go off in our different directions. We get mired in the day-to-day work and the strategy gets forgotten. So how do you keep strategy at the forefront of everyone's mind and really instill that story in everyone's mind? What's the protocol to use to program people like Neo in the original Matrix, where he would download all these different martial arts programs? How do we have something like that where we get our vision and our strategy into someone's brain? Well, strategic goals and objectives will let us do that if we make them visual and come back to that story on a regular basis. You must have a cadence, a rhythm that you use to check in on these goals and objectives. Specifically, the objectives, the shorter term time frame. You need to check on that every single week together, where you look at it and you're looking at red, green, yellow. Are we on track, off track? Does it need attention? And get everyone to report on that in a meaningful way. If you don't do this, you're creating a very high degree of risk that you will not meet those goals and objectives. And even if you do hit them, it'll probably take much longer and be much higher cost. So there you have it. Let me know in the comments what your strategic goals and objectives are for the year ahead and what techniques you like to use. Also, let me know if there's something else you'd like to see or something I could explain better. We read the comments and take action. This channel is for you to help you, so we love seeing that engagement. Finally, you can do several things to get more content like this, as well as subscribing using the button below and hitting that like button. You can visit the link I'll provide to sign up for the Result Maps community, and there you'll have access to our newsletters, interviews, free resources, everything we put out on a regular basis. If you've got strategic goals and objectives you want to mobilize and you want to help your teams thrive, even in volatile times, by accelerating their path to hit those strategic goals and objectives, go ahead and book a strategy call and we can explore whether there's a fit with our software or point you in the right direction if there's not. That's this episode. Be your very best and let's thrive in the year ahead.